What's up, everybody? It's your boy Showtime Doctor back with your which Advent heroes are worth investing in and which Advent heroes are not guide. So let's get into it. Essentially, the easiest way to answer this is it's not going to be the same for everybody. There are some slam dunk heroes you really should invest in, but there are also, depending on what your setup is, they can be situationally good, they can be not that good. Number one, start off with Callie. Obviously, most of us don't have Callie. I don't have Callie. But if you do have Callie, definitely keep Callie. Callie's freaking ridiculous. I really shouldn't even need to go over her skill set, but let's do it anyways. Number one, she puts Brand on her 1 and decreases target's buff duration if she's hidden, which is pretty ridiculous. Number 2, chance to bleed. 2 turns. Bleed is 30%, obvious. I'll stop that. I hate freaking saying obviously. Puts up an additional bleed. Wait, how does that work? Yeah. 2 additional enemies and causes them to bleed if she's attacked. So she's putting up lots of bleeds, percentage attack stuff. For 3, penetration increases her own attack. Get it high enough, it goes to 2 turns. Extra additional damage if it's attack type enemies. Passive, Moon Shadow, she's hiding at the start of the wave, 50% chance to hide when using skills. Poisons enemies for 30%, 2 turns if the caster's hiding. Just really ridiculous build, top tier win DPS right here. Has a resolve, she blinds all the enemies. And then also 40% additional damage when attacking enemies with damage over time effects. Which she's putting up poison, she's putting up bleed, so clearly you would keep her if you get her. That is actually my number one most wanted DPS right now. Now Skill Claire here, actually called Sinclair, I just call him Skill Claire because of the way his fight is. Situational, because we all need SSR fodder for Advent heroes. Or excuse me, SSR fodder to get our 5th and 6th purple stars for our SSR heroes. I'll go over his kit with you real fast and I'll give you my opinion. On his 1, chance for additional damage. It's pretty hard, you know, assuming it goes off. Once you get to 6, it gets to 60 and 60% of attack. So that actually hits really pretty hard. Number 2, has a chance to put a brand up. Unfortunately, this does not work the same as it works in his encounter. He can actually cone hit with this. But unfortunately for us, we get it as a single target no matter what. So that sucks. That's one reason why I'm down on him a bit. Inflict damage on his ult equal to 120 to 192. Also puts curse up at a pretty good rate. 30% of damage. His leadership, you know, Darkfire, they got some synergy. So Darkfire attack's acceptable. This is what really makes him right here. 50% chance to ignore target's defense when attacking. Inflicts 50% additional damage when attacking a curse target. Curse once again. He can put up with this 3. And then he has Looming Death. 75% chance to put up using Bluster. Bluster is his 1. When his HP is 50% or less. So that effectively right there kind of makes him a more PvP hero. Because his 60's putting up Looming Death. Looming Death isn't going to work on majority of content in PvE. It does work on some things, but also Looming Death is dispellable, and Rue or Karen will just get rid of it. So the usefulness for him in PvP is also in question now. Personally, I say fodder him, but there is a caveat to that. If you have a Dark Curse team, or a dark team that works off debuffs, such as with the new hero Nyx, Cheshire, Mary, who else has Curse? Decane, who we'll get into later. Consider keeping them then, because you can run a full dark curse team, dark debuff team, and that can actually be a really powerful team in this game. So depending on your situation, I personally am not keeping him. I do have one built up. I built one up because I used to think this said that when a target is under 50%, excuse me, this right here, he would put up Looming Death, but it is actually him. So you're playing with fire when you're trying to keep your main guy under 50% in any situation. So personally, I get rid of him, but in your case, you might keep him. Depends what's going on. Alright, so then we get over to the Dark Knight. Actually, they don't have one. Marvelous Heroes. Britain. Britain is also situational. Britain is light DPS. Probably the easiest Advent 4-star dungeon in the game. The thing about Britain is he puts out lots of AoE damage. And he has his self-stacking black bullet thing. We'll get to that later, but essentially, on your 1, if you have black bullets, you're going to be doing some AoE damage on top of your normal attack. On his 2, you can gain black bullets, increase all allies' multi-strike chance, 40% chance to cast Dangerous Omen, 70% if you get it built up. Basically, increases AoE damage dealt to enemies. And then on his 3, gonna do a big AoE attack. Explosion debuff is basically after X amount of turns, it is gonna explode for X amount of damage. It doesn't really say. I'm not completely sure how the explosion damage works, but basically it's a good chunk of damage. Cone effect, basically. Now his passive, 30% additional damage for each black bullet, or excuse me, on a debuff target. For each black bullet loaded, increased crit strike chance. So you can load up to 3, so you can basically have auto crit on them. If you have 3 up, this gives 2. You skill it up, it gives you... Oh, never mind, it's the same thing. So... Cast 150% Dangerous Omen on 2 enemies at the start of the wave. Dangerous Omen, if you forget, increases AoE damage dealt to groups. And then when you get a 60, he loads a black bullet just at the beginning of the battle. And then also whenever someone is killed by him. So he's situational. I would say, personally, I'd fodder him. If you need like AoE clearing for whatever reason, you can consider building him. Personally, I don't need him, but your results may vary. So, now we're going to get to Decane here. I really hate to say this, because I really love Decane's overall demeanor and his ambience, and just the way that he's designed. His voice actor is great. The way that Damien works, he's curse meta as well, so number 1, he's doing additional damage on his 1 whenever a target has debuffs. On his 2, he's putting up curse, 3 targets. 30% of his attack is damage. His 3 penetrates and also does up to 192% damage. Inflicts X amount of damage depending on how much you've skilled it up. If the target is cursed, so once again, curse meta here. Dark Wind synergy, that's an interesting one. 40% attack for 2 turns upon killing an enemy as a buff. Or attacking a cursed target stacks up to 3 times, so you see how the curse meta goes here. So if you're building the curse meta, definitely keep this hero. All of the caster's attacks become crit strikes once their HP reaches 50 or less. So if he's also like Sinclair, if he's less than 50% HP, the dude just becomes a truck and just starts critting everybody. You hit his ult, 192% penetration damage, you get it sealed up high enough, additional damage if targets are cursed. So he becomes a DPS machine the more that curse is up. Personally, I'm not building him. I might build 1. I'll build 1 just for the bonus, and if I ever do build a curse meta team, but for the most part, I'm going to fodder him. So, I mean, I fodder Britain before I fodder him, and I fodder Sinclair before I fodder him as well. But still, I'm foddering him. But hey, just for if you're into the cool factor, Decane's really freaking cool. So I will not begrudge you if you decide to keep Decane. As for other Advent heroes, let's see, make sure I'm not skipping any. Alright, so Sid, if you got to the point where you can get Sid, keep Sid. Sid right now is only multiplayer, unfortunately, although I am personally trying to get a copy. And then just wait for the solo dungeon to come back. The dungeon's really hard, though, so be aware. You need some really strong fire heroes, or just really strong heroes in general. The reason Sid's so good, keep Sid, by the way, is my recommendation. Sid's one of the top tier supports in the game. On his 1, it has the typical heal thing, but it also has chance. Why is that not going? Oh, never mind, it was. I just didn't see it. Okay, it's gonna have a 100% chance to remove a target's debuff. Really strong for a 1. On his 2, decreases ally skill cooldowns and a cone effect and restores HP. That's really strong as well. His 3, he's got a revive, restores 40% of health, decreases target skill cooldowns by 1. You get it skilled up, decreases skill cooldowns by 2, revives 2 allies, so that's pretty strong. Fluttering Feathers, that's his buff he acquires. Essentially, whenever he uses a skill, he'll grant damage immunity to ally with the lowest health chance, excluding himself. At the start of the turn for a turn, consumes all Fluttering Feathers to grant a shield equal to 30% of HP to all allies. For 2 turns, if there are 3 or more Fluttering Feathers. That passive mitigation is so strong, guys. So strong. I luckily have a friend with a Sid I use sometimes, a Guildie. And Sid, this alone is worth getting Sid, even if you don't look at anything else. This entire skill set, you just get this passively once you get Sid. It's ridiculous. So, I mean, seriously, a shield 30% of HP to all allies. I believe that's his HP, by the way, but I'm not completely sure. They haven't clarified it. But either way, even if it's the person, the target, your friend's HP, still really good. And then Willful Wind, once you get a 60, obtains the Fluttering Feathers at the start of the wave, so... Revive with 10% HP upon death, grants damage immunity to all allies for 1 turn. Upon revival, and increases allies' crit strike chance by 30 and attack by 30 for 1 turn. Or excuse me, not upon revival, when an ally's HP drops below 30 once per battle. So super strong kit. Sid's ridiculous. Definitely keep Sid. Do not fodder Sid. Sid is ridiculously good. Now, Taio's over with, but if you were lucky enough to get a Taio, build Taio up. Taio is super strong. Not to mention, Taio is also a very rare water DPS in this game that does not revolve around the frozen mechanic. Probably the strongest one. Reason I say that, on his 1, 25% extra damage for each Hot-Blooded Instinct, which is a stacking buff. We will get into that later. His 2 is probably the worst part about him. Does a little cone target. It can hit pretty hard, but the thing about it is it increases all your allies' attack by 30%. Depending on what you're running with, what situation you're in, you might want to put that buff up. It'll go to 2 turns once you skill it up. Decreases, but the bad part is it decreases his counter and his multi chance by 50%, which you want him countering and multiing as much as possible. I will show you why in a second. His ulti, it's a pretty strong attack, and it has a high chance to stun. The more you skill it up, the higher chance to stun. And it also gives him a 100% chance to decrease damage taken by 70%. Really strong mitigation there. You get that to 6, it turns to 2 turns, and you got an 85% chance to stun. Just overall, Dynamite Punch is a really amazing skill. On a 5-turn cooldown as well, so that's really strong. You get a Sid in the party, you can make it a 4-turn cooldown, etc. So Hot-Blooded Instinct, the way Hot-Blooded Instinct works, this is what makes this character. Obtains when attacked or attacking rather. Each Hot-Blooded Instinct increases crit strike chance by 25%. Keep that in mind. You do not want to build crit strike chance on this guy. Landing a critical strike consumes all Hot-Blooded Instincts, so they all go away, and inflicts... passively, he just inflicts 50% additional damage upon counter-strike or multi. That's why I said you want to counter-strike and multi on this dude as much as possible. Also, keep in mind with your Hot-Blooded stacks, on your 1, your 1's doing additional damage, depending on how many Hot-Blooded stacks you have. Goes up to 40 if you get it to 6, and he's hitting 160 on his 1. And keep in mind, this stacks, I do not know if there is a cap for it, but it definitely stacks to at least 10. So be very careful if you are fighting against a Taio in PvP. If you stun him and you focus him, be damn sure you're going to kill him, because he is getting a Hot-Blooded stack for every time he is attacked. So if he gets up, and he gets out of that and he gets an attack off, he's going to basically insta-crit if he has 4 or more. And he's going to hit you really hard depending on what move he's going to do. So be aware of that. But if you yourself have a Taio, that can get pretty ridiculous depending on what's going on, especially since he has so much damage mitigation. If you get a 60, increases critical strike damage by 20% for 2 turns upon landing a crit strike, stacks up to 3 times. Once again, this increases every stack of this, your crit chance by 25%. So if you are multiing enough, you will have that up, this crit strike buff up. It's a 2-turn buff. You will have that up, 3 charges of it. You should pretty much have it up all the time unless you get dispelled or stunned, whatever. And also decreases damage taken by 70% for 2 turns and guarantees counterattack when his HP goes below 50 once per battle. So that's a little bit of a mitigation slash buff there with the counterattack. So this character is super strong. Probably top tier water DPS right now, him and Esna. But this guy's going to put out more damage most of the time than Esna, unless Esna's getting lucky with her mental seals. So if you have this character, keep this character for sure, especially since water DPS is really hard to get. For damn sure, keep that character. So, Christian, he's the new advent here, if you manage to get a copy. Real quick, I'm going to say just at the beginning, Christian is worth keeping. I have 2 copies right now. I haven't built him up yet, but I'll be working on that today. So what makes him so good? All of his skills, first of all, have penetration damage on them. Is 1, 35% chance to increase his own critical strike chance by 20% for 2 turns. You skill that up. Gets to 60% eventually. And the crit strike chance percentage increases 2% per turn. On his 2, penetration damage equal to 120% attack on 1 enemy and 2 adjacent, so a cone effect. 35% chance to force targets to reveal weakness. Reveal weakness basically until that character takes another turn. Every strike against them is going to be a crit. So right there, just alone, Christian's worth it. On his 1 and his 2, as you can see, he's increasing critical strike for himself and team. His 3 hits pretty hard. 100% chance to increase all target skill cooldowns. That's really good. 50% chance to remove all buffs. You skill that up, it goes to 480 and 80% chance to remove all buffs, and it goes to 2 turns versus 1 turn on the skill cooldown. So really strong on his 1, 2, and 3. His leadership, critical strike chance by 20 on wind and light. That's pretty strong. Light and wind has pretty good synergy in this game. Saya, for instance, gives a buff that gives additional dodge, 20% dodge to light and wind. And then the blessed one, another good reason to have him here. Inflicts additional damage, 20% damage for each buff applied. So if you have a buff-heavy team, he himself can give himself some buffs with his 2. Or was his 1? His 1 proc. Yeah, does he give himself? Maybe that was something different. Okay, never mind. Ignore what I said about the buffs. But he does give himself a little bit of buffs. 80% chance to apply 20% healing over time to the caster for 2 turns when launching. I'm assuming that means when he lands a critical strike. So you got some healing mitigation there. And then on his 60, Knight of Light, 80% chance to decrease the debuff duration of all light allies by 1 at the start of the turn. So you're running a light team. This dude's helping you out, except for you don't want that if you have Looming Death. But everything else you want it on. 60% chance to grant the caster damage immunity for 1 turn when the caster is healed. So this character just overall really strong, especially for a hybrid. Probably a top tier hybrid in the game. I haven't used him myself yet, but just looking at his kit, super strong. So I would say if you're able to get Christian, build Christian, keep Christian. Kind of funny he has like an armor thing on his 4 and his 5 before he gets his 6. But definitely a top tier hybrid right there. So now we're going to get into the SR. There are some SRs worth keeping. SR admin heroes. Let's just get to them here. Who's this guy? Oh, that's Attack. SR. Okay, we got a couple here. So Reina. Reina's situational. She's win defense is technically her classification. Her one basically it does a cone effect. Actually hits fairly hard considering her kit. We'll get into that. On her 2, pretty good chance to stun. Pretty good deeps as well for her 2. You can get up to 320. And then her 3 inflicts penetration damage and 2 adjacent enemies. So pretty high multipliers there once you get it skilled up. On her kit here, her passive, right when you get her, next attack will be a critical strike whenever the caster receives a defense increase effect. I believe you have to get that from someone else, so that's situational right there. But guaranteed crit is pretty cool. Grants 1 ally damage immunity for 1 turn upon landing a successful critical strike. This is a shield, they don't really tell you. This is a shield. You can break it with penetration damage. It can also be dispelled. But in general, pretty strong. When Dark has a little bit of synergy, but not really. So personally, I fodder her, but if you see something in her, you need a win deeps. You know, she's not bad if you can get some copies of her. Her advent isn't that hard once you get to that level. It's hard when you first get there, but once you get to that level, it's not bad. I personally fodder her, though. Sharon. Sharon has charm meta, so the thing about her, Sharon, her one's nothing special, charming shot. Her 2, counter strike chance for all allies by 20%. 2 turns, grants them healing over time, not bad. Once you skill that up, their percentages go up. For 3, 35% chance to charm, 3 targets. If the target's already charmed, increase additional damage. Her passive is she has 80% chance to charm when counterattacking, so that's pretty strong if you run a charm meta team. So Surdic, Mina, trying to think who else has charm in this game. Ica a little bit, etc. And then charms target for a turn when attacking the enemy with 50% HP, less than 50% HP. So the enemy has to have 50% or less HP with charming shard. Charming sharders are 1. So basically an instant charm. To me, her kit's not worth it, but she's sexy as all hell. I personally think her 5 looks sexier than her 6. But you know, that's there for you. I fodder her. If you happen to be running a charm meta team, maybe you want her. It's up to you. Let's get into it here. Who is this? I don't think she's a meta hero. So Zenon, I'm actually high on Zenon. Zenon is a fire DPS berserker, very similar to Morrigan in a way. I personally am keeping Zenon. I will show you why. On his 1, inflicts damage, 35% chance to basically stop healing for 2 turns. And inflicts additional damage if the target's HP is 50% or below. So Zenon is a finisher. Zenon will hit you really hard if you're below 50% HP. On his 2, pretty hard hitting 2. You can get it up to 320 when you skill it up and decrease buff duration, depending on percentage chance there, how high you skill it up. 3, his 3 hits everybody. Also, it ignores defense, so it hits pretty hard. You can get it to 288 if you skill it up enough. And then his passive removes all debuffs and becomes a berserker for 3 turns when the caster's HP reaches 30% or lower once per battle. Very similar to Morgan. While a battle, the caster's attacks increase by 50 and resolve is activated once, but they become uncontrollable. You can probably control them if you get a, what's it called, abnormal status immunity. I'm not completely sure on that because I haven't used them, but you can do that with Morgan, so I'm assuming you can do it with him. And 30% chance to apply Looming Death for 2 turns when attacking and while affected by Berserker status. Increases damage dealt to bosses by 30%. So another reason you can use them for PvE right here. He's hitting bosses harder. Passive Fire Dark. Fire Dark has good synergy in this game. 20% additional crit damage. That can be really good. Overall, not like a really crazy kit, but a solid kit. So I am going to be building a Zenon, especially if you like a Morrigan or a fire DPS in general. Zenon's worth building if you can get your hands on him. Zenon Dungeon is actually pretty hard. I got a guide up for it. Bring your water DPS. Pretty much all I'm going to say. And let's see here. What other heroes are? Renta. Here's another one. Renta, personally, I fodder him. But I would show you his kit. 100% chance. Inflicts additional damage on chance. Or 100% damage, though. Yeah, if he gets this additional damage, he can actually hit you pretty hard with the rest of his kit. On his 2, he has a chance to apply poison. He hits 3 targets. Poison up to 3 turns if you skill it up. Then on his 3, puts up Reveal Weakness, which is insta-crit on that person for however many turns it's up. Pretty solid multipliers here. 165 is the starter, 264 once you get it skilled up. 100% chance to inflict additional damage equal to 30% when attacking a poison target. So if you happen to have a poison meta team, for whatever reason, Renta will do you pretty good, especially as a win deeps. You don't have a Ruby if you don't have one of the other good wind deeps in the game. There are a lot of wind DPS in this game that actually inflict poison. So if you got that going on, poison, if you guys don't know, it's not the happy poison like it is in most games. It is you cannot heal that person. Healing will do damage to them. So, and then it's 100% chance to poison the target for 2 turns upon a successful critical strike. So there you go. He's basically based around poison. He can hit really hard. I personally don't need him on my team. I got a Ruby. So, but if you happen to have a poison meta team or you just feel like building one, this guy's here for you. I fodder him personally though, but it's situational. Now, Julie, this is a hero in my opinion most people need to start building. I will show you why in a second, but real quick explanation. First of all, she's water DPS, which is fairly hard to find, and she's water DPS that does not revolve around freeze mechanic, and she has an overall solid kit. She's not putting out Taio damage, but I will show you what she brings to the team right now. So on her 1, pretty much she has a chance to attack in a cone effect. Otherwise, she's going to do a single target. On her 2, pretty good percentage there, 200% to one enemy, 70% chance to decrease target's turn speed. Basically a snare, the equivalent of slow for those of you that play Final Fantasy. Really good for her 2. Her 2 can really wreck you really hard. On her 3, basically it's a AoE, gonna do up to 192% damage, 6 turn cooldown. This is on a 3 turn cooldown, by the way, so if you have a focus target you're trying to keep slowed, you can just continuously slow them with her, assuming they're not immune to that. Now her leadership, Water Dark, crit strike chance, there's Water Dark synergy as you've been showing earlier. Now here's what makes her. 100% chance to inflict damage equal to 30% of attack that ignores defense. So every hit, she's doing additional damage that ignores defense, 30% of her attack. So you build her with attack percentage in mind. So basically, on her 1, 2, and 3 overall, they're good, but it's not like, oh my god, good. But this right here is what makes them. Because she's basically inflicting 30% additional damage on every skill that she's using. So that's really nasty. And then her passive here, this is a very interesting passive for her 60. Excuse me, that was the original passive there. Hammerman's Daughter increases the caster and one ally's attack by 30% for 1 turn at the start of battle on the caster's every 3rd turn. So at the start of the battle, randomly she's going to hopefully increase your other DPS's attack damage by 30% and herself. And every 3 turns. So every 3 turns she's putting that buff up for herself and a random ally. It's RNG a little bit there, but if you happen to be running her with like a Taio or another water DPS or another good DPS, a free attack up buff. You can't really go wrong with that, especially with her. So if you build her kit up, you see here 160, 60% chance for bonus damage. Always keep in mind she's dealing additional 30% additional ignore defense damage. And you get this up, 100% chance to decrease target's turn speed on a 320 on a 2. That is really nasty. Plus an additional 30% for the ignore armor. This is going to go to 192 on everybody and also an additional 30%. Solid hero right here. Her dungeon, it's kind of rough if you're newer, but if you can get copies of her, get copies of her in my opinion and skill up her 2. And then your choice of either her 3 or her 1. Because she's going to hit most often with her 1. Her 3, 6 turn cooldown, not terrible, but she'll pump out some good damage for you. She's never going to be PvP material in my opinion, but PvE, she's a solid kind of an attack with some support there. So, and especially if you're liking a water DPS, go and get yourself some copies of her. I'm going to skill her up ASAP. Chessmaster, probably another hard 3-star dungeon. He's a tank. Chessmaster is well worth getting. Let's go into it here. Very underrated tank in this game. Dark. So on his 1, has a good chance to put up Brand. On his 2, taunts all enemies. It's an instant taunt, guys. Instant taunt. So, very good, because most taunts in this game are chance on hit, percentage based. And grants himself a shield equal to, depending on how much you skill it up, 20 to 30% for 2 turns. You're going to be building this guy HP for sure. So, and then on his 3, checkmate inflicts damage equal to 120% to all enemies. 100% chance to decrease recovery amount. So basically, to any target below 50% HP or more. So if you got like a focus target and you do not want them to get the big heal off next turn, you can put that up and continue focusing them because they're gonna have to dispel this before they heal. Goes up to 192%. Pretty strong. On his kit though, increases his own counter attack chance by 20%, becomes immune to damage for 2 turns when an ally's HP drops below 50 twice per battle. That is super strong. Super strong. And remember on his 1, he also has Brand. So anytime he's counterattacking, he has a chance to put Brand up. And then he's got Resolve. Upon taking fatal damage, grants himself a shield equal to 30% of HP. All allies. Oh, my bad. It's all allies, not the caster. For 2 turns, once Revive is activated. I always wonder... I'm going to have to actually see that in action. Because Revive, that can go off on any other hero. I'm wondering if you get a shield because of that. If you do, that's really strong. Or if they mean that whenever his Resolve goes off, I'm not sure. Or maybe it's just Revive on him. I'm going to have to actually see that in action, because if you've been watching this video, we've seen that twice now. But this guy is a highly underrated tank if you have him. I have a copy of him. He's on my docket, but right now I'm going to start building Christian. But in my opinion, keep, you know, depending on Dark Light synergy here, critical strike damage. Depending on, you know, if you got another tank that you're into, like Claude. You know, this guy, he does different things than Claude, but he's highly underrated for a tank. So in my opinion, keep. Your mileage may vary. You might want to get rid of him. I always forget which one of these people is the actual boss. I believe it's Natasha. Because this is the band. Yeah, I think Natasha's the actual boss. Okay, so Natasha. The band units in this game are very unique. The greater majority of them apply this Fanatic debuff. Trisha, the one that I showed you earlier, the guitarist, she's actually shock meta, but she also stacks very well with this team. Essentially, what happens here is she has a high chance on her 1 to put Fanatic debuff on. Fanatic is also exploited by Francis, the little violinist guy, and I believe one other hero, although I forget which one it is right now. So keep that in mind. Fanatic is a buff that only certain units can take advantage of. On her 2, 70% chance. Put Fanatic status on 3 enemies for 2 turns and increase caster's critical strike chance. That's pretty strong. Penetration damage on her 3 up to 192. And then Rockstar, her passive she comes with, increased attack by 20% for 2 turns each time the enemy becomes Fanatic. So you see what that does for her. It stacks up to 3 times. You can get her to 60% extra attack just from Fanatic status going on. Other heroes can apply Fanatic as well. Restores 5% HP when receiving buffs, so that's cool. And then 80% chance to silence Fanatics for a turn. When you get silence in this game, essentially you can't use your 2 and your 3. So that has potential to be really strong. Personally, just for the aesthetic, I'm building the band team. But if you fodder her, you know, that's up to you. Leadership's critical strike damage for light and water. Doesn't have a lot of synergy from what I've seen, but not bad. So, you know, your results may vary. I personally am going to build a band team. I'm going to build this girl, Trisha, the guitarist, Francis, the violinist, Aika, the idol, dancer. And I forget, I believe there's one other musical unit, just to have them, just for the lulz. I think it'll be funny. And that's all of your SR admin heroes here. Now, there's a couple R ones. This girl's one of them. Claris, in my opinion, fodder, not that great. So not good, I'm not even going over her kit. It's just, she has a really dumb kit in my opinion. She needs to be buffed a bit. Let me try to find what it was. I believe it is that her 3 only becomes active when... I forget. Someone was telling me in the guild. Let's... I don't know. But anyways, her kit's not that good. She's a support. There's better supports, even advent supports. So in my opinion, fodder her. Not even worth going into. Now let's see. Flare? Yeah. Flame Girl Flare. Fire has sufficiently good characters, in my opinion, that you can fodder her, but I will go over her kit. She's not bad, but there's better out there. So she's burn synergy, so she has a chance to put her burn up with her 1. On her 2, additional damage if burned. You can get it to 320. It actually hurts a lot. And then her 3 hits 3 targets, 264. Not penetration, not ignore defense, but still hits pretty hard on a 5-turn cooldown. Grace of Fire burns target when counterattacking, 30% of attack for 2 turns. 50% chance to increase the target's skill cooldowns by 1 when attacking a burned enemy. So, decent kit, not great. If you really need fire heroes and you happen to gotten screwed on draws, hey, maybe go get her. She's not super hard. Although she's fairly hard for a 1-star. But, let's see. But personally, I'd fodder her. Yeah, Rachel's in it. Okay, so Rachel. By the way, bonus. Any girl with bouncing boobies and bandages, I'm always down for that in anime. Just had to get that out there. Alright, so this girl, she has Curse on her 1, increases her own crit strike. That's actually a fairly decent buff right here. But it's for her. If it was a group buff, I would probably actually recommend getting her. But otherwise, her own critical strike chance and increased multi-strike chance. Pretty good. On her 3, attacks cone effect enemies, 3 enemies, additional damage of curse. So, hey, a potential curse meta hero here. If you want it. If you happen to not be able to get, like if you haven't gotten a Mary or something yet, Dark. Also synergizes with the current Nyx Dark Curse meta. Her passive increases her attack whenever attacking a cursed enemy. And then 100% chance to counter attack when attacked by a cursed enemy. So not a great kit, but if you run a cursed synergy team, consider her. Otherwise, fodder her in my opinion. Unless you like the bouncing boobies. Who else here? Alice. Alice actually isn't bad, but I fodder her personally. She's shock meta. So 50% chance to shock on her 1. Once you get it skilled up, 30% otherwise. On her 2, pretty good buff here. Critical strike chance, removes all debuffs. Once you skill that up, that is going to be 40% crit strike chance. And her 3, you can get it up to 288 percentage on a cone effect, 180 to start off with, 30% chance to expel one target 1 turn. Inflicts damage equal to 30% if target is a boss. Expel is basically puts them in another dimension, removes all buffs and debuffs. They can't do anything. I'm not sure if it can be dispelled. I've only seen it a couple times, and I didn't have my dispellers at the time when I was doing her dungeon. Increased damage to shock targets, and expels an additional target upon using hair if you get her 60. So you can expel up to 2 targets. Situationally can be good, but for the most part, I just fodder her. Light DPS. There's way better light DPS out there, but not terrible. Not terrible. So for a 1-star. Who else? Remember what Nikolas... Nikolas an advent hero? I believe he is, actually. Well, I'll cover it. I forget if Nikolas is a shadow hero, but I don't see him a lot, so I believe he is. So we'll go over his kit real quick. You know, nothing special on the 1. The 2, blind, not that great. 3, the shadification, has potential here, so check it out. To the caster for 4 turns, honor the effects of shadification. Attack is increased by 50%, max HP is decreased by 50%, water damage. So, if you have enough buffing, well, we'll go over the rest of his kit before I get into it. Resolve upon fatal damage, restores 40% HP once per battle. 50% chance to blind. So, the only way I would run this guy is with Ronin, because Ronin is water as well. And potentially, with the blind, Ronin will be dodging, and Ronin, every time he dodges, he buffs his attack by a percentage, stacks up to 5 times. I believe it's 10%. Might be 8. So the blind would work well with that. But Chatification, double-edged sword, yeah, potentially could be really good. I mean, once you get it up here, you see, once you level it up, the max HP thing goes down to 5%. I forgot to show you guys that, and attack goes to 100%. So that's the reason why I'm saying it has potential here, especially as a water DPS, which we're pretty rare on in this game right now. I will actually be keeping him to experiment with it, because I am very interested in that ability. The rest of his kit, you know, is whatever, but I will be keeping Nikolas personally. You can do whatever you want. Now, the Asteroid here. The Asteroid Len, she's kind of interesting. Most people don't use her. I foddered her before, but I'm considering keeping her now. She's a hybrid fire. Shock meta, so additional damage if you're shocked on her 1. Damage apparently doesn't skill up on the shock, unfortunately. So on her 2, grants a shield equal to 40% of HP to herself. The next attack is a 100% chance to be a critical strike. And bring that up to 50 in 2 turns. Oh, it's already 2 turns. Alright, on her 3, inflict damage equal to 165% of attack to 3 targets, 50% chance to shock. Bring that to 264 in a cone effect. Not terrible. Now the thing that makes her, increases attack by 40% for 2 turns upon receiving a shield. So if you have a shield heavy team, she puts the shields up herself. It can be really good. So go ahead, I don't like looking at that stupid bunny outfit. No offense to bunny hero. Anyway, so then we get her 60, 50% chance to silence the target for 1 turn when attacking a shocked enemy. So if you have a shield shock team, it could get you some mileage, otherwise I'd fodder. Hybrid fire, but fire is already strong enough on the hybrids. But hey, if you can fit her in, you happen to have something that's going to work for her, go for it. Alright, so this hero, MauMau. MauMau is actually a keeper, in my opinion. Let me just stretch here and I'll show you why. Alright, so Honor 1. Chance to cast Curse, you skill it up. You know, it only scales the damage. But 50% chance, that's pretty good for a base attack. Number 2, inflicts damage equal to 120% of attack to a target and 2 adjacent enemies. 50% chance to poison for 30% attack for 2 turns. You can skill that up to 192, it's a cone effect. Honor 3, inflicts damage equal to 120% to all enemies, 50% chance to create a voodoo doll. Keep in mind this voodoo doll is highly important later. Inflicts damage equal to 30% of attack for 2 turns. You can skill that up, get it up to 192. Now, check this out, Voodoo Ritual, passive. Inflicts 10% additional damage for each debuff applied to the target. Inflicts damage equal to 50% of attack to all enemies with Voodoo Doll if the caster is attacked. So you're starting to see how ridiculous this is. The Voodoo Doll, I don't actually have her, but if it works like it does in her advent, the Voodoo Doll is basically a thing that spawns. It has 5 health, but you can only do 1 damage to it per attack. So someone like an Ashley or a Rue, they can kill it faster than like a Kane or Rebecca or someone like that. So, but while it's up, you see that damage amp that's going on just passively. That's really good. And then she has a revive, so pretty strong when another ally dies, so she's actually worth getting, and she buffs accuracy for those rare encounters where you need it, rather than ruining for it. Accuracy for wind and dark. So, in my opinion, keep. Highly underrated. Your results may vary. Another wind DPS if you happen to be failing on wind. With some support here. A little bit of attack buffy. Spawn an extra thing for the enemies to hit. Puts poison up, puts curse up. I mean, that can be really strong, especially with the debuff meta that's starting to take shape here now that we've gotten heroes like Edwin and Nyx. So, my opinion, keep her. She's a 2-star advent. I think, is he an advent? No, he's not. She's not Advent. She is. So this is the last character we'll be talking about, guys. Carmen. Carmen is unique. If you are playing this game and you have gotten screwed on supports, like you don't have a Ryu, you don't have a Karen, maybe you don't even have a Demos, you don't have a Ramu. Obviously, you're probably not going to have Sid if you don't have any of that. Excuse me. Consider this hero. Honestly, consider this hero. There are some decent SR supports you can get just from draws, but consider this hero. So, Honor 1, pretty strong. You know, you skilled up. I see a lot of people, by the way, let me point this out. You neglect your 1s on your healers. Look at how much additional healing goes on. 7.5. Most characters start at 5. You can get up to 10%. Some characters can get up to 15% on your 1, so consider that. But anyways, things that make her unique. On her 1, she's hitting 2 people. So you're potentially provoking more counters, but you're also healing a lot more, depending on if your multis are going off, etc. And actually doesn't do terrible damage, considering it's whatever target you hit and then one random target are her targets here on her 1. On her 2, Fate Manipulation, increase one ally's attack speed, so basically haste. 50% chance to decrease cooldowns by 1 turn. The caster falls asleep for a turn, so you gotta, he's falling asleep, it's on a 3-turn cooldown, but it's there for you if you want to haste a DPS or whatever character. On her 3, Starfall. Okay, let me look at this. Can you upgrade it? 100% chance if you get it to 6. On her 3, remove one debuff from each of the allies, so you got some debuff removal on her 3. It's a long cooldown, but we'll get to that later. Restores 30%, 33% of allies' HP. HP restoration is increased by 10% for each debuff applied to the target, so you got a lot of debuff. She's doing additional healing for you. And you can get it to 50% the more you skill it up. Now, the reason that I said long cooldown, on her 1 here, has a chance to decrease her cooldown. On her 3, so potentially you cast this twice. Potentially, depending on how much you skilled up, you can get rid of your skill cooldowns. The 6 for this, and then also on her passive, 30% chance to decrease the cooldown of Starfall by 1 turn. Starfall is her ultimate. With each skill cast, so basically anything you do has a chance to get it. Some cooldown reduction. And then she has a self-revive, so you got a healer with a self-revive. So once again, if you haven't gotten Light and Fire, Recovery Mount is her leadership, by the way. If you haven't gotten yourself a good support, consider getting Carmen. Carmen's pretty easy to farm. You just need like some really hard-hitting deeps or poison. Poison wrecks are pretty hard, actually. Or Mental Seal. I'm not sure. Actually, Mental Seal might not work on her. But poison wrecks are pretty hard, so that's there for you if you want it. And yeah, guys, so hopefully that helped you out. This has been your Knights Chronicle Advent Heroes Guide. You know, if you happen to have some experience with some of the heroes I said I didn't have experience with, or go ahead and share in the comments which heroes you're liking. Those are the ones I'm leaning towards, and, you know, situational heroes, so. Anyways, yo, I'm Showtimedr on Twitch, twitch.tv/ShowtimeDR. You found my YouTube, obviously, if you're here. Got a link to my Discord in the chat, my Twitter in the chat. You can see when a video is posted on my Twitter. And yeah, that's me. So hopefully this guide helps you guys out. Peace out. I will see you later. Bye-bye.